Hi there, welcome back to the channel. Michael Warth here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the egg drawing that I did right here. This is what the finished egg drawing looks like. I'll pop up some stuff here in the video as we go. We're going to talk about value here, but for you to understand value, you need to understand dynamic range and protecting your highlights. But essentially, you're limited to your paper, your canvas, your white, your brightest color, your highest chroma, brightest color. Those are the things that's all you're going to be able to control when you try to work on your dynamic range, which means if you want to have a particular range going from light to dark, you may have to shift darker in order to protect those highlights. And that's what I did here with this egg. This is hard to see in the video because the lighting inside of it is different than the lighting out here. And I had to change some things up for trying to make it a single light source. When you were drawing as a kid, you would draw like a smiley face was a circle with a couple of dots and a mouth, right? And as you got older, you learned a little bit more about facial structure, and if you wanted to draw a face, it had to have some form to it, and you couldn't just simply draw lines and be done with it. And as you get better at being an artist and better at drawing in general, you're going to realize that it's less about the line and more about the shape and the shadow and how light reacts to the subject matter. And an egg is a perfect example of a subject matter that gives you a very simplistic view and allows you to really practice that sort of thing. So I want you to grab an egg, and I'm going to put a photo in a blog. I'll put a link below, and you just do a right mouse click and copy that picture from my blog if you don't have an egg, or if you want to work from a photo or something, and that's fine too. If you don't want to do a setup kind of like what I did here, you can use just one light. Put it on the table, one light, put a piece of white paper underneath of it or something, and that'll get you all set. The materials I used in this particular drawing, you can pick up really a 4-pack of pencils and use those. This is a HB, 2B, 4B, and 6B set from Derwent, which I really like Derwent pencils. As I mentioned in my first video, episode 1 of this drawing series, I use a 10 of pencils. I've got 12. I'll put a link below with a place you can actually purchase these. It's an affiliate link. I make a little bit of money from that. It doesn't add the cost to you, but I'd be really grateful if you use those links to get your materials. With my drawing here, I created a grayscale over here, going from the darkest that I could get to the lightest that I could get, and I paid close attention, again, to dynamic range of what I could achieve with that egg. And as you can see, the drawing looks a lot darker than what you're seeing here. Now, again, with the camera and all that, it's not picking up the dynamic range the way our eyes see. In fact, our eyes have an incredible dynamic range, and that's why working from photos a lot of times you lose dynamic range. Back to materials. I actually only used 3 pencils and a kneaded eraser and a gum eraser. The gum eraser I just used to clean up my edges, my lines here, make them a little bit better. The kneaded eraser, I used it to lift my highlights. It works like an eraser. Which leads me to another point. This is not so much a how-to draw an egg. It's more tips and tricks on how to achieve this look. I used a HB, which is the hard version. Think of this as your light. I used a 9B, which is your dark, and I used a 4B, which is the medium tone. So each one, HB, pretty light, 4B, I'm putting a little bit of pressure on the paper, but not much. I'm letting the graphite do all the work. And then lastly, this 9B, and see, it starts out even dark. with a little bit more pressure, you can go different angle, fill in the paper. The paper I'm using is Strathmore Bristle 300 series. It's not real expensive. 9x12 vellum surface. Make sure you get the vellum surface. You can use the smooth, but I find for pencil the vellum works best. You can do charcoal on that too if you want to. Alright, all of my blending was done with my finger. You can get a blending stump if you want, but I caution you to really be careful how much blending you do with a stump. You start getting a more shiny surface, and I don't think that's what you're after. When you start getting a shine, it starts looking like a pencil drawing. It starts looking off. It's not really a good tone, I think. It's personal opinion. Okay, the way I approach this, pretty simple. I laid out the egg shape. I found the edges of how wide the egg is, how tall the egg is, and used that as relation to what I was seeing. This was not done in sight size. I didn't hold up a pencil, and when you do sight size, I'm left eye dominant. So for me, holding up, I have to go with my left and look at it and use my finger to get a width. That's sight size. That's not what we did here. That's not what I did here, rather. And I really know this is gonna mess up my audio, so just bear with me for a second. I'm looking at the drawing this way and the subject that way. So I'm actually, saying, okay, it's about this wide. So when I start this drawing, it's a matter of saying, okay, I want the egg to be that wide, right? I'll draw it dark so you can see it. I draw two guidelines that say, okay, I want it to be that wide, and hey, I want it to be this high, okay? And then I just simply, I'm drawing this way too dark. Don't draw your lines this dark. Start out with really lightweight lines and work from there, okay? So then I start with an egg shape. And then I locate the shadow that's down below, all right? Like that. I want to indicate where my highlight is. So something like that. And then in the case of this one, I've got it backlit, so the light is up here going down like this. And the light is reflecting on this part of the egg and hitting me in the eye. And that's why I see the highlight here and not on the back. I mean, you're just not going to get a highlight on the back unless you're standing back there, right? So in this case, the main shadow is here. There's a dark cast down here, and there's actually reflected light right here. That's coming back up from the white. When light comes down and scatters back this direction, that's what's creating that little highlight. These kind of subjects give you an opportunity to really focus on getting shape and understanding value and understanding the overall value of a shape. You've got to have your darks, you've got to have your midtones, you've got to have your highlights. If you work with just those three, you're going to have pretty impressive drawing skills right out of the gate. Focus less on your lines. Focus more on where the darkest areas of the drawing are. Focus where the midtones are, and then look at the planes, right? So, how does this egg look? If you were to break it down into like a flat plane surfaces, it'd be a bunch of flat planes. If you were to look at the egg and think of it as a bunch of flat planes, you'd have like, squares that basically indicate, where everything is. And if I get down here, these are the darker squares. This one's a little bit lighter. This one's a little bit lighter. And this one's really bright. You're basically just going all the way around with these planes, this way, this way, this way, and this way. I know I'm oversimplifying this, but honestly, that's really all you got to worry about. One of the secrets to what I consider one of the biggest secrets and the most advanced concept in drawing and painting is edges. You have to know your edges. Okay, you've got receding edges and you've got sharp edges. Sharp edges make things look sharp and detailed, and receding edges give you depth. They go away. In the case of my egg, the receding edges are the ones that are going down into the shadows, and this edge over here kind of gets lost in the background a little bit. The sharper edge is up here where there's a contrast of highlight and dark. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to use white fabric in the back. I wanted it to showcase, you know, some other shapes and some abstract shapes here, but go a little darker and give me some depth. And then the white on the bottom actually is close to a mid-tone on this side and becomes very white over here because the light, again, is coming this way, you know, and that's really all I'm after. So think about that as you go, that drawing an egg is a great way to learn how to understand how shape works, and you're really only drawing a couple lines. You're drawing the outside edge of the egg, and you're trying to get that form with just a nice gradation of value. So yeah, go grab yourself an egg, draw it, you know, put one light source on it, you know, find a comfortable spot. You don't have to work on an easel like I did. You can work on a table, a drafting table. You can put it on a board. This board, I use it a lot. I'll put it in my lap and just sit and draw. And, you know, it doesn't have to be complicated. Grab a couple pencils, a piece of paper, set your egg up and draw it. And I would recommend you do this with a lot of different materials. You know, something stainless steel, something rusted, something wood, you know, and start really getting into the whole process of seeing how value works. Look for the highlight, look for the shadow, look for the midtones. Be careful with your edges. You know, your initial sketch is only there to lay out the proportions. So once you get your proportions, add the midtones and the shadows and the values and work on that. When you get your highlights in there, start adding some details and be done with it. Protect your highlights, because you know you're only going to get, in the case of working on paper, you're only going to get as white as the paper is. That's it. All right, I know this wasn't a how-to video in some cases. This is more of a why-to video. I think this is how you need to do it. I think this is basically the process that you need to think through when you work on things like this. This is becoming a long video. I didn't want it to be a long video. Thanks for watching. Stick around for episode 3, where I'm going to be talking a little bit more about charcoal and how to do the same thing basically in charcoal that we did with graphite today. Have a good one. We'll see you next week.